What's up, guys? We're live. Welcome to the live hour, guys. Welcome to the live hour. How are you guys doing today? As you guys join, just say hello in the comments. I want to know who's joining today. Today we're gonna talk about McCartney's 1 year anniversary. We're gonna talk about what's gone good, what's bad, and what is done right ugly. And then there are one or two things that you can point to that have been, downright ugly. I think we can be honest about that. You guys know, I know there is a tendency on social media for some people to be like fully like joking on it when it comes to Mark Carney, but other people also just straight up despise him. But I think the truth is somewhere in between. For Mark Carney, it's not. I'll be honest with you. If we're being constructive here, it's not been all bad. There have been some good things, but we also that we're also gonna be give some constructive criticism today. There's also been some bad things. That is straight up fact. So today we're gonna talk about Makani after 1 year as prime minister. When is our 1 year anniversary is coming up on March the 14th. Has he delivered? Has he delivered? And I want to know how you guys feel. Let me know what topics, what things are important to you, how you feel about some of those, how you feel Makanya has done on some of those issues. If you're a person that's married to the idea of oil and gas, how do you feel about the progress towards the pipeline, for example? If you're a person whose major concern is on affordability, how do you feel about affordability? If you're a person that is mostly wants to see action on the trade on a trade deal with the United States, how do you feel about that? So we're gonna go through and touch on all these issues. I've come up with a list of issues that I think are topical for Canadians. But I also want to, by no means is this exhaustive. I want to hear from you guys as well in terms of what issues what issues are important to you, and how do you think Marconi has done on some of these issues. So as you guys get in, just say hello to me in the comments, and then we can get started right away. I want to get your thoughts. How has Marconi done? How would you rate Marconi on a scale of 1 to 10 over the course of his 1 year as Prime Minister of Canada? That is the topic we're talking about today. Who's with me? Who's with me? Who's with me? Who's with me? If you guys are not live, of course you can always get your thoughts in the comments, and we can always have a chat in the comments afterwards. Um, for those of you who don't know, who are new here, who don't know what the channel is, where we pride ourselves on being a constructive, mostly neutral channel. We don't tend not to take too much of a side on some of these issues. So I'm not here to just like totally just like dunk on Mark Carney, okay? That's not what this show is. This show is about constructive criticism. So you won't find us just like straight up like everything Mark Carney does is perfect. I know there's some people like that. That's unhealthy. But you won't also get us saying that, Mark Carney has been shit all around. I know some people say that, but that's unhealthy too because we know that's not the truth. So, without further ado, I know you guys are slow to get in. Some you guys are kind of taking your time a bit today, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm gonna start the show, and I imagine you guys are gonna join me later. So, I mean, how's Mark Carney been doing for you? How is Mark Carney been doing for you? That is the question. How would you rate Mark Carney on a scale of 1 to 10? He's 1 year in office so far. Now, here's where I want to start. I want to start at the point where Makani took office. Makani took office after, obviously, Justin Trudeau announced he was leaving on January 6th. Belatedly, I guess. I'm sure there's some people that would have loved for Justin Trudeau to take the hint a little bit earlier, but he didn't. And eventually, January 6th, 2025 was when Justin Trudeau finally got the message that Canadians were not gonna change their mind, and no GST holiday or any of those things are gonna change people's minds. Um, and we he in order to help his party, of course, at that point we he announced he was resigning, rather than obviously go on and lose to Justin to Pierre Poilievre in a federal election, which was obvious that Justin Trudeau was going to lose in a federal election. And so, in order to help his party in the process of selecting a new leader and to be competitive in the next federal election, he prorogued Parliament from January 6th up until March the 24th, I want to say. And the Liberal Party obviously had their leadership selection process that eventually led to this selection. I know a lot of my conservative friends will say Mark Carney was selected as against him being elected because he was the clear front runner, and it looked like everybody was kind of like pitching him a layup in the end. And so the entire process led to a short process, I would argue, for the Liberals, led to the selection of Mark Carney as the leader of the Liberal Party. And then we got plunged almost right away into a federal election, which I predicted, by the way, was going to happen. But we got plunged into a federal election, which took place on April 28th, and we've had McCartney for a year. So how do you guys feel McCartney has done in the last year? Now, here's the first exercise I want to do here for you guys. Here's the first exercise we're going to do. I am going to I'm going to show you I'm going to show you some polling data. I'm going to show you some polling data so we can kind of see how the polls are showing that Makani is doing at the moment. And but obviously polls do not necessarily these polls do not necessarily reflect how Makani is doing on certain issues, right? And so what I would do is after we see these polls, we're gonna get a little bit more granular with some of the issues, like affordability. How is he done? So let's do that now. I'm gonna share my screen a little bit quick. Don't worry if you'll see me a few times here. That's just my control panel. Hey, okay. What? Okay, so Michelle is saying my sound is not so good. Okay, that's bad. Let me see if I can fix that. Fix that, Michelle. Let me see if I can fix that. Michelle, I'm gonna need your help here. Okay. Um, if anybody, you guys just let me know if you're able to hear me because I can't hear myself. So I don't know. I don't know how I sound on. But here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna reach out to my producer and see if they can hear me, and then we'll try and fix this. Okay, we'll try and fix this. We'll try. Just give me a moment. I'm gonna try and fix this for you guys. So, but in the meantime, I want to know how has Makani done for you over the last year? He's been prime minister for a year. How has Makani done for you? I'm just gonna text my producer now just to make sure that the sound is all good. Okay. Hey. Okay. So, for now, while I just figure that out, I hope you guys can. Okay. What I'm gonna do is I just want to check in and make sure that before I disconnect everything and then it becomes an even bigger problem. So, can you hear me now? How's this? How does this sound, Michael? Michelle, sorry. How's this sound, Michelle? Can you hear me? I need somebody to confirm they can hear me, please. Just that way we don't spend the whole time kind of dealing with with engineering problems. Can you hear me correctly? Can you hear me fine? Okay. Sounds. I've gotten confirmation that I sound okay. Michelle, I'm not too sure why it's sounding that way for you, but let's proceed. Okay. Okay. So Abby says they can hear me. If other people can just confirm that they can hear me, and then we can just move on. I'm sorry, Michelle, if I sound bad to you. Anyways, so I want to talk about McCartney's track record over the last year. Oh, Michelle is saying you, but it has to have my. Oh, you're saying your sound needs to be at maximum for you to hear me. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it up a little bit more. Okay, so I've turned it up to a bit of a louder kind of volume. I'm kind of on the edge here. If I go a bit over, you guys might not like the quality of the sound. But let's proceed. Let's proceed. Okay, thank you, Michelle. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I love when you guys point to that kind of stuff to me because I do want you to be able to hear me so that we can have a proper discussion. So thank you, Michelle, for pointing that out. And you guys, Abby and Maple Boy, for helping me troubleshoot. So let's go on. Let's go on. We've wasted a little bit of time here. So I will kind of do a short intro for those of you who didn't hear me earlier. I said McCartney has now been in office for a year, right? That officially started on March the 14th. Was McCartney's first day, well, was when he was sworn in. And this came after, obviously, Justin Trudeau chose to eventually he got the memo from that Canadians have been telling him for the longest possible time, get out of office, right? And Justin Trudeau finally decided on January 6th to leave. Parliament was prorogued for a few months, about 2 months, until March 24th, until March 14th, when Mark Carney was sworn in as Prime Minister of Canada. And then we were immediately plunged into a federal election um, on April 28th. And eventually, Makani emerged as winner. So, over the course of the last year, how do you feel Makani has done on the things that are important to you? Affordability, whatever is important to you, you tell me. If you're a pipeline person, how has he done on the pipeline? How has he done on on things like the One Canadian Economy, which was a big campaign promise? How has McCartney done? I want you to rate McCartney on a scale of 1 to 10. Give me some things that you feel he has done well on certain things. Let's be constructive, okay? Now, what I wanted to show you in the start here is obviously the polling. The polling is what a lot of people have been talking about, maybe a little bit too much these days. But I want to start there because it reflects a little bit um, yeah. No, Maple Boy says I would say at 28th of April would be a year. Actually, the reason why I said March 14th is a year is just because he was first sworn in on March 14th. That was when he was selected as the leader of the Liberal Party. So officially, he was prime minister at that point. He didn't get the mandate from the people, from the Canadian people in an election, but he was prime minister. That's why I consider March 14th to be his 1 year. Okay, so that's why I did the math like that. So um we see here, obviously you're looking at like the beginning of this graph here. Maybe you guys can see the graph on the beginning of this graph here represents election day 2025. And you can see that there have been a few kind of like ups and downs. Sometime around like July, you saw the a little July 2025, you saw a little bit of a spread. But where are we right now? We see that Mark Carney sits at 45% in the popular vote, 45% in the popular vote, and the Conservative Party sits at 36%. So this is the Mark. Based on this, you're seeing that McCartney is more popular today than he was on election day, which is bonkers, really. But again, it's not all been rosy, right? And that's why I said we're going to be constructive today. So that's what the polling is showing. It's interesting that the NDP seems to be basically at the same point, the same spot they were on election day. The Bloc Québécois about the same as well. The Green Party, for some reason, has gained a little bit, or yeah, a little bit, or more or less the same. It's interesting. So that's what the polling shows, right? That's what the polling shows. But outside of an election, I'm going to remove the polling, the poll information now. But outside of an election, I don't care too much about the polls. What I care about more is how McCartney has done for Canadians. Maple Boy says I would give it an 8 because of Trump, but it is not his fault. 8 out of 10 for McCartney. Whoa. Now you need to explain that for me, Maple Boy. Explain that for me. Why does McCartney get an 8? What has he done? Give me a list of things that he has done that impressed you. As I said, we're going to be constructive today. If you tell me that McCartney has been perfect, will you tell me what has been perfect? Don't just tell me you give him a number. A number is good. I like a number. It gives me a sense of where your mind's at. But I also want to know why. So you guys get in the comments. Let me know why. Why would you rate McCartney, Maple Boy, for example? Why would you rate McCartney an 8? Why would you rate McCartney an 8? Because for me, honestly, I would rate McCartney honestly maybe a 6. Maybe a 6. I'll tell you, and I will we'll go through a few things. I don't think he's been completely horrible, but I don't think he has swung it out of the park as much as people think. We'll get into that a bit more. So I would rate McCartney a 6, actually, a 6 out of 10 at this point in his time in office. I would rate him a 6. I rate him a 6. But I've asked you to explain why you would give McCartney an 8. I'm also going to explain why I've given McCartney a 6. So let's start. Now, what is the most important issue for Canadians right now? I would say affordability is probably the big one, right? That's affordability. So you guys tell me, how do you think Mark Carney has done on the issue of affordability? I want to know. Are things more affordable in your area? Because I live in BC, so it's not. It's not good. Stuff hasn't got more affordable. I'll tell you that much. It hasn't got more affordable at all. Okay. So you guys get in the comments. Let me know. This is the first issue we're going to talk about. How do you think McCartney has done on affordability? And Michelle says, Carney is the better one of a bunch of crap politicians that we have all in those parties. That's fair. That's fair. But what I'm saying here is let's offer some constructive criticism. Okay, I'm not saying compare him to Pierre Poilievre. I'm saying rate his performance. Rate Marconi's performance. Forget about Poilievre for now. Okay, rate Marconi's performance. Maple Boy says he has reduced tariffs on canola, seafood, and all. Oh, okay, and all the deals and he signed while traveling. Okay, that's what you're saying. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that one is on trade. We'll get to trade. Okay, we'll get to trade, Maple Boy. But for now, we're talking about because I mean your those deals he signed, and that to be fair, Maple Boy, that is one of McCartney's strongest files on diversifying Canada's trade and reestablishing contact with India and with China. That's one of McCartney's strongest files. Okay, I would rate him very highly on diversifying Canada's trade. But on what I'm talking about right now, we'll get to that. By the way, I'm not going to take away his strongest file and not rate him good. He has done well on that file. But on affordability, how would you say McCartney has done? Now, Michelle says for for affordability, he didn't do nothing. Nothing changed at all. I agree, Michelle. I wouldn't say he did nothing because here's the reality today. Okay, the reality is that Canada still has at this point the highest food inflation in the G7. Okay, that is a fundamental truth under Marconi at the moment. Okay, that is the truth. Also, we're talking about the other side of that, and the other thing a lot of people spend money on is rent. Now, if I was being honest, rent has come down. I live in and around the Greater Vancouver area, and rent has come down. So, in terms of affordability, clearly that helps, and that is kind of triggered by the lower immigration numbers that we're seeing. We know McCartney has done a lot as caught immigration significantly from the peaks set by Justin Trudeau. We know that much. So that in terms of rent, rent is getting a bit better. It's more affordable. But in terms of food and groceries, we know that Canada has the highest food inflation in the G7. This is a big talking point for the Conservatives. Now, Michelle, you were saying that McCartney has done nothing. Here's where I'll dispute you on that. To be honest, to be fair, McCartney did cut taxes by 1%. He He has introduced a boost to the GST tax credit, and he has also made the school food program permanent. Now, these are all things that are designed to improve affordability. Now, I fully agree, Michelle, that that has not necessarily landed in people's pockets right now, and I wouldn't say things are cheaper right now just now. Okay, so when I guess when you say it hasn't done nothing, maybe I imagine you mean in terms of it hasn't actually landed in people's pockets. Yes, things are still unaffordable, so I agree with that, Michelle. So to be fair, that is one of Marconi's weakest files, to be honest. It is one of Marconi's weakest files, but uh okay, so let me catch up with your comments. Okay. So Maple Boy says also we have affordable Chinese EVs. Those EVs have not arrived yet, Maple Boy. They've not arrived yet. But I think I don't consider cars to be one of the fundamental things. I mean, what are the most important things for a person? You know, you need food, you need shelter, and if those things are affordable, that goes a long way. Cheaper Chinese EVs. How many people can actually? I mean, in your hierarchy of needs, I wouldn't categorize cheaper Chinese EVs as on the top notch. Is kind of why, I would say the Chinese EVs are a good thing, but I wouldn't categorize. Okay, so Michelle is saying in Quebec rent is still crazy. Interesting, and um, so Quebec did not change. Um, and Maple Boy is saying the Gripen jets that we're gonna have made in Canada, and same with the submarines. Hmm. Um, I wouldn't say the Gripen jets. I know they're trying to build a manufacturing plant in Canada, um, and aren't the submarines from South Korea? I'm kind of I'm surprised you're saying those are made in Canada, but maybe my memory is failing me on that one, Maple Boy. Uh, Michelle says also, to be fair, I think it will be more than 1 year to fix all the problems because there's a lot to do. I would not like to be in his shoes. That is fair. I mean it, but here's my fear and my concern with what Makani is doing on affordability. My concern there is, so think about it. For groceries, the biggest thing there are a few things that impact like grocery affordability in Canada right now, right? there, there are a few things that impact grocery affordability in Canada. One is the fact that we only have a few chains. We only have maybe like the three chains or something. Um, the Obviously we have Loblaws. We've got Loblaws are the ones that own like Real Canadian Superstore and No Frills, and we've got like the Walmart, and then we've got like the Safeway chain, right? Those are I think the three chains that we have. All those little stores you have are sort of under those three buckets. And so because there's very little competition, you find that there's not enough competition in terms of setting prices that people can afford, right? Now, No Frills, for example, is a budget option sort of for Loblaws, but there's not enough of those options, right? That's why maybe some of the socialist people are suggesting things like public grocery stores, government-owned grocery stores, for example. And we also know that things like what's it called now? Things like the interprovincial trade barriers. That's the word that's what I was looking for. The interprovincial trade barriers also impact the cost of things at the grocery store. So, you know, it worries me that not enough is being done in by way of competition. And so it's very easy to say, okay, it's only been a year. It will take more than a year to fix all the problems. But the truth is, are they doing the things that will make things more affordable in the future, like getting more grocery chains to come to Canada, like maybe things like trying to figure out pricing control so that these grocery chains are not price gouging, right? Because we know there's this thing that people say in terms of affordability: prices always go up and never down. So those are the things that I'm thinking about, Michelle. Maple Boy says you need to keep in mind because of Trump, we have to diversify our economy, and that is why it would seem that Marconi did nothing. No, I didn't. What I'm saying, Maple Boy, is that these are two different issues. Is what I'm saying. Diversifying the economy and affordability are not the same issue. And we'll get to diversifying the economy. As I said, I rate McCartney very highly on diversifying the economy, not on affordability, because I don't feel that the measures he has taken he has put a lot of band-aid solutions in place. Like, as I said, the the tax cut, the things like the school food program and things like the GST tax credit. Those are all band-aid solutions. Those do not completely solve the problem. Okay, so let's move on. The other here's the second one. The second issue that I think is important to Canadians. How do you think Makani has done in terms of job creation? How do you think Makani has done in terms of job creation? What do you guys how do you guys feel about that? How do you think Makani has done for job creation? Would you say that Okay, so Michelle says there is no competition in Canada. Uh, okay, Michelle is saying we should open the border with the United States and you'll see the price come down. Okay, so there is kind of a balance to be had there in terms of opening the border to Canada. You sound like from what you said earlier, it seems like you're a Quebec person, Michelle. There are many farmers in Quebec that thrive and continue to stay in business because of things like the supply management, right? And we know Quebec is very much, in favor of keeping supply management in place. And the problem with having opening the border, like as you say, like that, and then just allowing U.S. products to come in without some of these supply management controls in place, is that that will effectively leave us in a position where obviously the agricultural products in the US are greatly subsidized by the government. That that would lead us put our farmers in a position where they probably are going to get beaten out of markets, and we will find ourselves pretty quickly in a position where we will depend on the United States for our food. Now that, unfortunately, especially given the way the Donald Trump and some of the things Donald Trump has done in the last year, might not be the best idea in terms of putting ourselves even further into the arms of the United States. We need to be more self-reliant, is what I say. And so that's the problem with putting with just opening the border to the United States and having no supply management in place. Now, I'm interested in hearing your perspective because I know you and Maple Boy are Quebec people. I'm interested in hearing you guys' perspective on that. Um, so how do you think Marconi has done on creating jobs? Because we know at the moment that employment rates are still pretty bad. Employment rates are still pretty bad. Obviously, that is tied very much to obviously the trade war, because there are many jobs that depend on Canada's trade with the United States. And just looking at, like, from Stats Canada here, you see that every single age group, every single age group is worse off now than they were well, I guess they're better, slightly better now than they were in 2025, but compared to 2022, they're in a significantly worse position than they were in 2022. That is what we're seeing in the data here. Uh, well, most of them, apart from, I guess, the 55 to 64-year-olds. And the people that are suffering the most in terms of jobs right now are you've often heard about youth unemployment, right? Those people between 15 and 24. Youth unemployment is the highest in all the age groups in Canada right now. And it seems to, up until maybe like October of 2025, it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Okay, so uh, that is also something where, although McCartney is trying to spur a lot more a lot more industries, because that is how you create jobs, right? That is how you create jobs. With you spur a lot of business investments, which McCartney has tried to do. You spur a lot of, to be fair, business investment is up in Canada over the last year under McCartney. But that is how you spur jobs. You spur a lot of business investments. You want companies to open up. They create jobs, right? And obviously, limiting the number of immigrants also kind of feeds into that, because then there's less competition for the jobs that are available. Yeah. So the fact is, McCartney has. I mean, those whatever McCartney has been doing so far on job creation has not hit the. Maybe it was so bad. Maybe we didn't realize just how bad it was before, but maybe it was just we were just that far gone that it's taking Carney time to catch up in terms of job creation. But we're in a worse position now, considering the trade war. Obviously, there are extenuating circumstances, but the fact is we're not in a better position in terms of job creation. Okay, under Mark Carney. Michelle says, for that, so he means job creation. Michelle says, for that, I don't know. I am working with a crazy structure, and there's lots of work here in Ottawa, Gatineau. Oi, are you working for the government, Michelle? um, wow. Michelle works in Gatineau in in Gatineau. Okay, I mean, what? Maybe there are. I don't know. I don't know much about like the. I don't know much about the labor market in that area. But it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that there are lots of work. There's lots of work over there. I will tell you that there's not a lot of work so far as I've seen in the Greater Vancouver area. Now, um, there's still it's still very very hard out there. I will be honest with you. I know a guy. I'm going to tell you a quick kind of anecdotal kind of story. I know a guy that got laid off from a job maybe I want to say at the end of 2024. He's an engineer. He's still looking for a job a year later. Okay, that's and there's more than one person I know that have been through that particular kind of situation. It's not a good market right now. I'll be honest with you. It's not a good market right now. And also, we know that wages are not necessarily the wages need time to catch up to this massive, massive, massive kind of inflation we're going through right now. This kind of like the affordability problem that we talked about, right? So that's where we are. So again, Makani, I don't think has done enough in terms. Well, it hasn't materialized just yet in terms of job creation, is what I'm saying. Michelle says our money is not good and it's not helping too. Yeah, obviously the Canadian dollar has taken a hit over the last year as well. It's our dollar. I know the conservatives will tell you it's because government spending is out of control and that erodes the value of the dollar. And it's not false. That it's not false. There are a few other things in there. You know. Yeah. So you know the dollar the Canadian dollar next to the US. I know the US dollar too has been doing a bit of a nosedive relative to the euro, and some of the other world currencies, but relative to the Canadian dollar has not done too well over the last year. So that's what I think of McCartney on the jobs. I don't think that it has whatever's being done on the ground. Obviously, we know of all the job losses that have happened linked to the trade war, but in terms of job creation, we're not quite seeing the progress from McCartney. I'll be honest about that. So now let's talk about one thing that this was a campaign promise by McCartney. So I'm going to judge him a bit more harshly on this one. Um, on Canadian economy. This was a campaign promise by Mark Carney. Oh, Michelle says I am in construction, and there's lots of work in Ottawa, Gatineau. To be fair, construction is you know what? I that's a good shout, Michelle. Construction is probably one of the things where I think there will be, and this is something that was that is becoming more and more evident right now because Canada's building is going to have to build a lot over the next decade or so, and I think Mark Carney is readying a to get into like that kind of like ramp up phase of construction of things. So I think you're in a great industry, Michelle. So it makes sense now to me why you're saying that there's a lot of work. Construction is one of those where if you're in construction right now, chef's kiss. You're in the right place. You're in the right place. Congratulations, Michelle. Now, I wish I could switch careers and go into construction. You know, that I feel like that's where the money is going to be over the next decade or so. I think there's going to be quite a bit of money in construction. So, congrats to you. You made a wise career decision, Michelle. Anyways, I am going to I want to, as I said, I will judge McCartney a bit more harshly on the one Canadian economy because that was a campaign promise. So how do you guys feel that McCartney has done on one Canadian economy? You guys get in the comments. Let me know. So I will tell you what I think. I'll tell you what I think here. Now, we know how important eliminating our interprovincial trade barriers is, right? It's so important, especially now, right? And you guys have heard the rhetoric. Macron has said several times, we can give ourselves more than the United States or any other person can take away. We know that it is estimated that eliminating all federal and provincial and territorial trade barriers within Canada would boost our GDP by as much as $200 billion over time, right? That's a lot of money to add to our GDP. Now, McCartney, obviously, one of the first things he did. Michelle says, Michelle says, "Fuck no." That's hilarious. Anyways, okay. So how has McCartney done in terms of one Canadian economy? Now the fact is this: the the one of the first few things that McCartney did in terms of when he got into office was to introduce the one Canadian Economy Act, right? And if I was being fair, they did eliminate all federal barriers to trade within Canada. That has been done on the federal level. However, so technically McCartney has delivered on his side of the bargain. Now, unfortunately, we still don't have the much needed one Canadian economy. I'll tell you what they actually delivered. What they delivered. I've got a kind of a short summary of what was actually delivered. Um, yeah, the One Canadian Economy Act achieved the following objectives. So a goods produced, used, or distributed in line with the requirements of a province or territory will be recognized as meeting comparable federal requirements. So essentially, this part tells you that the federal government recognizes if something meets the requirements of a province. So essentially, the federal government allows the provincial standards to be used in lieu of the federal requirements. Okay, so there is that. The second thing the One Canadian Economy Act achieves is a service provided in line with the requirements of a province will be recognized as meeting comparable federal requirements. So again, the federal government recognizes any provincial standards relating to the provision of a service. So goods and services, we got that. And the federal government said a worker licensed or certified by a province will be able to work in a comparable position in federal jurisdiction. Okay, so yeah, those are the sort of like the three things that the One Canadian Economy Act achieves. However, now this is where things like I can come back to what I said about like food affordability in this country because what does the One Canadian Economy Act fail to achieve? Well, anything that is under like the provincial jurisdiction, anything that is under provincial jurisdiction is not really impacted here. Things that are impacted by provincial, interprovincial, those provincial set trade barriers are really the biggest contributor to us not having one Canadian economy at this point in time, because the provinces, still need to harmonize things like trucking rules, right? They still need to accept each other's, for example, alcohol, or sorry, for example, food safety inspections, right? The provinces still need to harmonize on those sorts of things. And right now, we know that if you're a nurse in somewhere in British Columbia and you want to move to Ontario, you'll still face hurdles in moving as a professional from one province to another in this country. We're still not there yet, because we know that credential recognition across provinces is still fragmented. It's still a patchwork. So there are still quite a few problems like that. Now, as I said, Mark Carney has delivered on his side of that bargain, which is he has removed the federal barriers. However, the provinces, are still, maybe it's just that we've created such a complicated system. I don't know why anybody thought that was a good idea, but we've created such a complicated system where it's taking time for them to properly harmonize and create this one Canadian economy. Now, it's not just the GDP growth that we can get, but there's also, think about, I was telling you about affordability earlier. If imagine like you can't just like the trucking rules are so fragmented, for example, that you can't easily like drive a truck from Alberta through BC, for example. It's just different trucking rules. And those little things are the things that make, for example, food more expensive. You can't easily just like truck food efficiently from Alberta. Maybe you want to buy Alberta beef and bring that into BC. You can't easily just truck things through. Okay, so in terms of the one Canadian economy, McCartney, to be fair, I would say he's delivered on his side, and he's been working very well on getting the provinces to kind of like get on board. And some of the provinces are moving a little bit, but it's not fast enough. Okay, it's not fast enough. I don't think some of these provinces realize the kind of emergency that this is. I wish they would move a lot faster. If I was being honest with you, I wish they would move a lot faster. So let's move on. In terms of the economy, and by the economy, I'm going to whittle it down just to be a bit oversimplistic. I know things like jobs are part of the economy, things like, but I want to whittle it down to just when I say the economy, I mean GDP growth. Has McCartney delivered in terms of GDP growth? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So Michelle is saying mining and his son is doing great. Wow. Dude, Michelle, why are you just here to make me jealous today, man? You just here to make me jealous? No, 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 no. That's great though. It's because again, mining is also another one of those like. Actually, Michelle, are you offering career counseling? Because I think I might need some career counseling, my guy. Um, that's wild though. I mean, you and your son have chosen really great careers for the time that we're in right now. Like it's such a great time to be in mining as well, because we know that, I mean, you just look at the list of McCartney's nation building projects. You see, there's like maybe like four or five of them. I might be exaggerating that, but I think maybe four or five of them are mining projects of some sort, right? And it looks like we're coming into a time now where as a country we're more open to exploring our resources, which wasn't always the case under Justin Trudeau. So I mean, you and your son are gonna be bringing him back over the next decade or so. Congratulations. Anyways, if you're offering career advice, my guy, just let us know in the comments. Let us know in the comments. Maybe maybe you give us some career advice for kids that are looking to pick up a career over the next few years. What can we do? What can we do? Anyways, so let's talk about the economy. Now, has the economy for everything that Makani has said he has been doing over the last year. How did McCartney actually do in terms of the economy? And as I said, by the economy I mean GDP growth. In we have the information for 2025, and in 2025, GDP Canadian GDP grew by 1.2%. That's bad. In case you didn't realize how bad that was, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad, actually. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. Pretty bad. 1.2%. I'll tell you how bad that is. Let me tell you how bad that is. That GDP growth under McCartney in 2025 is so pathetic that it underperformed Justin Trudeau in 6 of the 9 years that Justin Trudeau was in government. That is how bad the GDP growth was under Mark Carney in 2025. And I don't want to I don't want to scare you too much, but this year is not projected to be better, any better. It will be slightly better, but not world changing better. Okay? The projections as of right now, maybe there might be a growth spurt that we haven't seen just yet. But projections right now is that GDP is not going to grow like tremendously. We're still going to be in that 1 to 2% range. That is bad. That is very bad. As I said, in 2025, believe it or not, McCartney underperformed Justin Trudeau in 6 of the 9 years that he was in power. That is awful. Because I would argue a lot of people consider Justin Trudeau to be one of the worst prime ministers Canada's ever had. Maybe it will age well, and we'll find out that Justin Trudeau wasn't as bad as it felt. As of right now, if you ask anybody who the worst prime minister Canada ever had was, they'll probably say Justin Trudeau. And here you are seeing that McCartney effectively underperformed Justin Trudeau in his 2025 year, in terms of GDP growth in 6 of the 9 years Justin Trudeau was in government. Granted, Justin Trudeau didn't have to deal with a trade war with the United States. You know what Justin Trudeau dealt with? Justin Trudeau dealt with the pandemic, right? That was part of that. That was the time when that was the I said 6 of the 9 years was he overperformed McCartney. Well, those remaining three, that's where those remaining three kind of came from. Okay, so that's bad. Just so you know, that's bad. Um, so that's where we are. Um, but to be fair, when you look at some of the numbers, business investment in under McCartney has kind of been going up, which is good. So that will help with those GDP numbers. Government spending also contributes to GDP. If you have not seen the formula for GDP calculation, the things that are included there, your net exports is included in that calculation, which is basically exports minus imports. Things like government spending, consumer spending, investor business investments are included in the GDP calculation, right? And maybe the business investment under McCartney is going up. Obviously, consumer spending not so much because the economy is not so good. And what does that do to people? People tend to be a bit more cautious with their bucks. People are a bit people I'd like to believe are rational enough to know that when the economy is as tight as it is right now, they should not be spending anyhow, right? So that's where we are. McCartney has not in 2025 did not deliver the GDP growth that he that we would that we could be proud of. We're not. That's not where we want to be as a country. Okay, we want to be much higher than that in terms of GDP growth. Next one. Next one. Let's talk about diversification, and this is where Maple Boy wanted to talk about earlier. As I said, I will give McCartney his flowers, and I know that I've talked about a few categories where he didn't do well, but this is one where McCartney did do well under diversification away from the United States. This is probably, I mean, not even probably, for sure, McCartney's strongest suit, right? McCartney uh, has done a lot in terms of he has secured deals with countries that I mean a lot of countries that Justin Trudeau sort of cut off, like India. Well, I wouldn't say cut off, but countries that we had a fractured relationship with over the last few years under Justin Trudeau. We're talking China, we're talking India. And Mark Carney, some people say he has ignored Canada's Canada's how do I put it now? This the word is running away from me. He has people are saying that he has ignored Canada's conscience. That Canada is now making deals with the devil because we're so desperate to grow our economy. That's how people interpret, McCartney making a deal with China and with India. But I think that was a good idea. I fully support McCartney making the deal with India and with China. Michelle says gold is good. Gold is good. Oh, you mean to invest in buying gold? Okay. Gold, gold is more interesting actually. Gold has, to be fair, gold has been pretty interesting. Over the last year or two, and maybe it points to just the uncertainty that there is in the economy that people are dipping into gold right now. Um, but yeah, you're right. Gold is pretty. Investing in gold right now is pretty good. Gold has been amazing. It's been on a tear over the last year. That's true, Michelle. That's true. Actually, just a quick anecdote there. Gold is so good that you have all these investment brokers actually selling like gold right now. Like if you look on something like Wealthsimple, if you're an investor kind of person, you'll see that they sell like physically backed gold on Wealthsimple these days, which is kind of wild when you think about it. Anyways, so as I said, let's get back to talking about. I want to give McCartney his flowers on this diversification away from the U.S. He has done a phenomenal job, I would say, on this particular file. He has delivered, or is moving into, has had agreements with China, with India, after long-standing disputes. We also know he signed a deal with Indonesia, which is one of those economies that people consider as next up, in the grand scheme of economies coming up. Now, let's talk about. But here's the thing: we if we're not we're not delusional here, right? So we know that signing a deal with the United States is priority number one. It is still very, very important that we cannot walk away at this point from a deal with the United States. And to be fair, I don't think we want to do that. We might not have a choice because of the Donald. But the fact is, um, McCartney has not as yet been able to secure a deal with the United States. Now, there's good sides and bad sides to that. But one of the reasons we have to get a deal with the United States is not just because at the moment we still have what 70% of our trade going with to the US, of our exports going to the US, um, or 70% of our trade is with the United States. You know that part is important, but here's the other important part. There are lots of countries. I was talking about business investments before. There are lots of countries that are investing in Canada right now and will only honor that investment if we still have Kuzma. Because comparatively, Canada is a small market, right? Countries like Japan, for example, they invest in Canada or produce out of Canada in the hope that they can sell into the United States. That is why some of these countries actually come to Canada. And the Japanese were pretty explicit with this. They said, obviously, if you don't have Kuzma, it might be a bit more difficult for us to proceed with a deal. Because and that's just business because that is it's simple. Oh yeah, yeah. Michelle says the army is also a good place to be trades. Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, especially now with this defense industrial strategy, man, it's probably going to be it's probably about to be a good time to be in the armed forces a little bit, but also obviously, and even if you're not even in the armed forces, things like there are many companies around like that kind of defense industry sort of thing. You don't have to if you want to have a work a place where your conscience is at peace and you don't want to make guns. That's fair. You can go and make things like radar systems or monitoring kind of systems. Those are all things that I think that are going to be. Michelle just absolutely absolutely threw me up. Michelle said Trudeau is a fucking Mr. Dresser. That just killed me. Jesus, bro. Come on, Michelle. What's that? What's that about? Anyways, yeah. No, what you're saying about like the army and the defense industry in general might be an interesting place to be over the next few years as well, because obviously there's a lot of spending that will be going into the defense industrial base in this country. And I like the kind of dimension that they're taking under McCartney, where they're trying to kind of spur an industry, not just to spend the money abroad. They're trying to spur an industry here in Canada that's going to create jobs. So it's not just about spending on the military. It's the jobs. It's really what I'm interested in seeing is the jobs that get created from this defense industrial base from Marconi. Michelle says our worst thing is our money not helping to buy stuff in our country. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So and that is a fact. Maple Boy says I think the people that follow Pierre are hopeless. That's funny. That's Miss Maple Boy. I know you. Riza Mona says Makani has delivered not a damn thing, not a damn thing. I mean, that that to be fair, Riza, that is kind of on the extreme end. As I said, things like diversifying our trade, I'll say Makani has done well on. On the other hand, things like growing our GDP growth was pretty bad, even worse than Justin Trudeau, if we're being honest. We are not seeing the job growth, for example. There's things like that where he hasn't done well, but there's things like diversifying our trade where he has done well, and business investments that he has done well. Is if we're being fair, as I said, we like to be fair here. Okay, so um, the fact is, on we as much as we want to diversify our trade, we still have to get a deal with the United States, not just for our exports to the United States, but we also know that a lot of the investments that are currently being promised to this country are based on Kuzma being done. If we don't have Kuzma, we're going to be in a significantly worse situation. That is just a fact. Okay. But one of the things I will give Marconi credit for is that he has somehow come out on the right side of not jumping into a deal with the United States and with Donald Trump. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. When the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that some of those tariffs that Donald Trump applied were illegal, you know what happened? Countries like India and I think the EU. Oh, no, EU is not a country, but the EU as a bloc. Hey, Fox Club is back. Fox Club is back. Where have you been, my friend? Where have you been? Where have you been? We've missed you too. We've missed you too. Maple Boy says the main objective of Carney is to build infrastructure to stimulate the economy. Yeah, no, I agree, and I know it takes some time to build infrastructure. And so in that sense, I can give you that. I can give you that, Maple Boy. That's my point. So today, obviously, for those of you who are just joining, we've been talking about McCartney is coming up on a year in office. He took over from Justin Trudeau, obviously before the federal election on March 14th, 2025. Right? That's when he took over. It's been a year now. Has McCartney delivered for you? What are the issues that are important to you, and how has McCartney done on those issues? We've talked about earlier in the show today. We've talked about affordability. Did McCartney deliver on affordability? Has he delivered on jobs? Has he delivered on things like, well, one Canadian economy, which was a campaign promise by Mark Carney? Has he delivered on diversifying our trade? So you guys get in the comments, especially those of you who are just joining in. Let me know your thoughts. So I want to sort of tie this up on the diversification bit. Now, I was saying that he has sort of come out, McCartney, on the good side of not rushing into a deal with Donald Trump, and I'll tell you why. After the Supreme Court or the Supreme Courts in the United States ruled that some of Trump's tariffs were illegal, countries like India and the trading bloc of the EU decided that, well, maybe they shouldn't, because they had earlier signed deals with the United States, right? On the premise that, if you're going to tariff us this much, so we'll give up this many concessions to you so that you don't impose these tariffs on us, right? That was the premise on which India and the EU agreed to a certain deal. Now they ended up in a situation where the Supreme Court struck down Donald Trump's tariffs, and they said, well, that means that the deal we signed was effectively signed on the wrong premise, so we can't uphold these deals. We can't be expected to uphold these deals. And guess what Donald Trump did? Donald Trump threatened them and said, well, if you don't stick to a deal that you signed on sort of on illegal terms, basically, I will actually find a way to tariff you even more. And so you imagine you've signed an unfair deal that has now been ruled illegal, the tariffs, and now you're being almost forced, almost strong armed into upholding that deal. That's awful. And so McCartney has sort of come out on the somehow good side of that, because yes, eventually we'll have to negotiate Kuzma, and I have predicted that very likely Donald Trump is going to insert a baseline tariff on Canada in the Kuzma agreement. He will put a tariff in the Kuzma agreement. I'm pretty sure. Right? I think that is what Donald Trump does, because I know we're not going to give up our supply management at this point. I don't think that happens. We might give them a bigger quota on some of the things that they want, like dairy and all of that stuff, but we're not going to give up supply management. So I think there will be sort of the way I think Canada makes a deal with the United States is we're going to have somewhere sort of a halfway happy kind of situation where we give them maybe a bigger quota on the things that they want, and they put a baseline tariff of a certain amount that they're comfortable with and we're comfortable with, of course. I think that's what's going to happen. Michelle says Trump is not going to be there forever. Well, fair enough, but I covered this sometime during the week. I don't think we should think about it as Trump is not going to be there forever, because I think that's a mistake, and I'll tell you why that is. I think that's a mistake. Yes, maybe Trump won't be there forever, but can you seriously trust that the United States, the Americans, are not going to vote for one of Trump's cronies? Maybe it will be Marco Rubio or JD Vance in the next time in the next election in 2020, whenever the election is, maybe 2029, 2028. I don't know. Can you seriously trust? Can you trust that the United States will not vote for a Republican as their next president? Can you trust that it won't be JD Vance or Marco Rubio? You can't. That's just a fact, right? So if you say Trump is not going to be there forever, you're making assumptions there that the next person is not going to be the same or worse. I don't think that's a good strategy, in my opinion, Michelle. Here's the other proof that that's a terrible strategy. I live in BC, so I'll use lumber as an example. Now, the United States has had lumber tariffs on Canada off and on for since maybe since Ronald Reagan was their president, right? That was in the 1980s, right? They've had tariffs on Canadian lumber for that long. I mean, at some point, I think at some point there was a pause, maybe under Obama or somebody had a pause. But effectively, my point to you is that under Democrats and Republicans, there have been tariffs on Canadian lumber from the United States. Okay, so again, that is there are fundamental assumptions that you're making there that, oh, if Trump is not the one in power, that things are going to change. I mean, a lot of Trump's tariffs on China, for example, were kept under Joe Biden. So so let's not make the assumption, let's not make a deal on the assumption that Trump is not going to be there forever, and so things are going to change for us. We should make a deal that is best for Canada. That is my point, Michelle. That is my entire point. Anyways, the good thing, I guess, is that although Canada has not secured a deal with the United States yet, and for a long time it was looking very bad because obviously the United States and Trump cut off all trade talks with Canada because of Doug Ford. Because Doug Ford went and decided to put an ad out up saying that President Ronald Reagan, who was a Republican, did not like tariffs, essentially. And obviously, Donald Trump cut off all trade talks with Canada, and has threatened at several points to cancel the Kuzma agreement altogether, which they can within with 6 months notice. A lot of people don't realize this, but with 6 months notice, the United States can actually pull out of the Kuzma agreement. So keep that in mind. Okay, so but the good news now, I said there was some good news. The good news there is that trade talks this week have resumed again. So we're back to the table, guys. We're back to the table. Hopefully they keep Doug Ford far away from that table so that he doesn't go and explode whatever trade deal, whatever concessions are on the table for Canada. Um, Doug Ford is useful for certain things, but please keep him away from, because I mean I don't think we've received an apology for him blowing up the possible agreement that was in place for aluminum and steel. We haven't received an apology for that, and I don't think we will. But still, I think they should keep Doug Ford away, far away from that agreement. Is what I think is going to happen. So we're back to the table. That's what I'm going to say. Okay, so housing, things like climate policy, there's been a lot of criticism of Mark Carney on climate policy. Now, I don't know how important climate policy is to you guys, but I think the left in Canada is kind of like Michelle says we need to create cities in the north. I think we need to do better to improve the infrastructure and things like roads and stuff in the north, for sure, for sure. Um, for sure, we need to do better with that. Fox Club says Ontario needs a new premier. Well, Fox Club. Yes, the problem for Ontario has never been the fact that I think everybody in Ontario recognizes that, or feels like they need a new premier, or most people do at least. But Doug Ford keeps ending up with these majorities because of course there's not a viable, or the perception of the people is there's not a viable opposition. The option, and that's why you see he keeps winning, getting these majorities, right? So I mean, what's different now? Um, we've got somebody like Nate Erskine Smith going into provincial politics. So, Fox Club, here's a question for you. Would you vote if Nate Erskine Smith is the Liberal candidate? Would you vote for Nate Erskine Smith over Doug Ford? Fox Club, that one's special. That one's a question especially for you, Doug. Especially for you, Fox Club. Would you vote for Nate Erskine Smith? Do you like Nate Erskine Smith as a potential Liberal candidate to compete with Doug Ford? Because he's going into federal politics. I'm sure he won't be missed on the federal level because people kind of regard Nate Erskine Smith as kind of a loose cannon, because for them, he feels like a loose cannon. I like Nate Erskine Smith. I'll be fair. He is one of those guys that speaks his mind, and I like that. I think that's refreshing that he doesn't toe the party line. I like that from me, just as a person just watching politics from the neutral perspective. I like that Nate Erskine Smith does not toe the party line. But I want to know, First Club, would you vote for a person like Nate Erskine Smith as the premier over Doug Ford? Let me know. So, on climate policy, a lot of people on the left have criticized Mark Carney a lot. They Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Michelle is saying one thing I like about Carney is he's a centrist. I think is what you're saying. Is a central politician. Yeah, I like that about him. I like that. I like that he's not. I don't like how far we leaned into like. I don't like how far we leaned into like culture war kind of like election questions under Justin Trudeau. I did not like that very much. So I like that now we're making the main thing the main thing, if you know what I mean. We're making the main thing the main thing. I just so we're talking about the things that are I mean the most important things. We're not getting bogged down by these constant culture war debates, you know. Um Culture war debates are important, but I would argue right now we're focusing on the main thing, right? That's what I don't want debates on whether you approve of children being able to transition to be the forefront of a federal election. I don't want that. Okay? I don't want that. I would rather be discussing how we make the economy better, how we make the country better. That's what I'd rather be discussing, not whether someone has a right to raise their kids or not, for example. You know, I would rather not be discussing that. I'd rather the governments kind of mind their business on that. Anyways, I might have, I might have, I might have not been too overly politically correct on what I just said, but is what it is. We're honest here. Um, Foxcroft says he would consider voting for Nate Erskine Smith. Consider voting for Nate Erskine Smith. Interesting. I mean, we'll see if Nate Erskine Smith actually wins in is the primaries. He came second, I think, in 2022. Um, so we'll see if he actually wins this time. It'll be interesting to see what kind of competition he gives Doug Ford. So that one I'm curious to see. Now, here is here is one part that obviously there are many things for us to talk about. Like for some people, the coherence of the climate policy is important. You guys can tell me how you feel about Mark Carney's climate policy. Obviously, he has scrapped a lot of Trudeau era policies, like like the EV mandate, for example. He has instead taken a position of like supplying EV rebates to help people buy cheap EVs that are now partly going to be sent in from China. So that's a good thing for affordability, but also for the environment in terms of emissions. That's a good thing, right? But on the other hand, we know that Makani seems to be obviously about two of the projects that he has referred to the major projects office are LNG projects. LNG is better for the environment than coal, for example, but still, it's LNG, it's fossil fuels, right? And that has also been done under McCartney. So the left has kind of been pulling their hair out on McCartney's support for things like LNG. You'll hear obviously someone like Avi Lewis, the leading candidate for the NDP, has been criticizing Canada's sort of push towards LNG a little bit. So the left has been upset with McCartney on his climate policy because they would rather see us not explore things like LNG, those kinds of things. They would rather we focus on renewables. I think that's silly at this point. But that's what they would rather see in terms of, because they feel like for climate policy, Makani has departed from what they would like to see. Apparently, they were. Well, it's kind of funny that they were happier under Justin Trudeau and Justin Trudeau's climate policy, even though there is really not that much evidence supporting that Justin Trudeau era climate policies were working. Anyways, that's I'll just leave it there for you guys. Fox Club says, I believe we need to re-identify what it means to be Canadian, rebuild our culture, and not shit on our history like we've seen under Justin Trudeau. Okay, help me out there. How about that? Give me a little bit more, Fox Club. Um, your what is what with if you identify what it let's do a bit of an exercise. let's re-identify what it means to be Canadian. To me, I think being Canadian is, standing up for what is right. At home and also on the international stage, we stand for something. We stand for we're the peacemakers around the world. We are the diplomats around the world. That is what it means to be Canadian at home, where and abroad, right? We are being what it means to be Canadian, where in terms of productivity, we've not been a productive nation for a very long time, my friend. So, um, in terms of rebuilding our culture, you know what I'm trying to get at, and you're saying, oh, we should not shit on our history. I think we need to accurately acknowledge history, and I think we after accurately acknowledging history, we should and there are a few debates to be had there where we can tie this obviously into the First Nations situation where a lot of people have said, well, why is why and they call it the reconciliation, the truth and reconciliation industry. That's what some of the people that don't like just how far we've gone in terms of like truth and reconciliation have gone. They feel like it exploits white guilt, because now you see some of you have probably heard some of the rulings being brought down from the courts granting title rights on or acknowledging title rights in places like Vancouver, and you guys have heard about the Cowichan case as well. So yeah, at this point, being Canadian as well, I think this is something that has defined Canada for a while as well. Being Canadian is also, I mean, you guys have heard this said quite a bit. We're a mosaic as against being a a melting pot, right? This is a country as a country we're a mosaic, but also like overarchingly, while we're a mosaic, so a mosaic meaning like a combination of different parts from different places. Um, we also sort of come together for the good of the country, and I think personally, Fox Club, that is the paramount most important thing. It's not just about, oh, we all came from different places, but I think as a country, where we fail is that I think we need to kind of bring while we might a lot of us might come from different places, and sure, our culture might be a little bit fragmented in that way, our personal culture, but Canadian culture by and large is one of tolerance. I don't think we should lose that. I think that is important. Okay, Fox Club. So that's what I'm going to say about that. You gave me a little bit of a philosophical perspective there, Fox Club, but that's what I have to say about that. Um, but so on climate policy, McCartney has kind of pissed off the left. I don't mind what he has done on climate policy, but those of you who are a little bit anal about his position on climate, you can let me know in the comments. On housing, they're not. We know that rent has come down, but when in terms of like housing starts and actually building to catch up on our lack of, because part of the problem with the unaffordability of housing in this country is just we haven't built enough housing, right? We haven't built enough market housing, but also not enough social housing as well, right? And that has not necessarily improved over the last year. In fact, Vancouver recorded a um, Vancouver actually did well though. Vancouver recorded a 37% increase in as of January 2026 year over year. Vancouver recorded a 27% increase. This is according to the CMHC website, due to higher multi-unit and single detached starts. Unfortunately, places like Toronto and Montreal saw some big declines. Toronto saw maybe somewhere around 2% decrease in housing starts due to lower single detached starts, and Montreal posted 44% year over year decrease in January. So pretty bad. Anyways, I want to start rounding up. Here is and this came up recently. Um Here's one thing that I do not like seeing out of Mark Carney. Now, we know Mark Carney has this tendency once in a while to talk out of two sides of his mouth, but this last week on the Iran attack by the United States and Israel, it was very, very annoying. Just how multi-mouthed our prime minister was. We started from a position where McCartney said, "Oh, we kind of expected the attack, that there would be an attack on Iran because it was moving in that direction. We were aware of the situation." And then, the situation kind of, as the situation evolved, McCartney then said, "Well, actually, we were not consulted before the United States and Israel chose to do this attack." And then he said, "Well, we're not going to be involved in any form of hostilities over in the Middle East." And then he said again, "Oh, we can't actually rule out the possibility that we might need to get involved to protect our allies." And I'm just like, bro, get your story straight. you know, get your story straight. So I didn't like that. Here's another example. In the case of India and foreign interference in Canada, one of his MPs, part of his caucus, said something like, "Oh, India is no longer a foreign interference threat. They no longer threaten people within Canada." And then, McCartney himself said, "Well, he wouldn't use those words. That is not necessarily true." Those are the kind of things where you guys need to come to a consensus on what you're saying, right? I can't be getting these mixed messages. So I haven't liked that at all in terms of like foreign policy from Marconi. Anyways, that's the show. Those of you who are not live with me, obviously, get your thoughts in the comments. Has Marconi delivered? He's now 1 year into his term as Prime Minister of Canada. Has he delivered? Has he delivered for you? So let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you guys are new, whoever is new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you, Michelle, for getting involved in the conversation today. Folks Club, thank you. Maple Boy, thank you. Riza, thank you for your comments. And Abby_9, thank you for your comments. I will see you guys next time. It will probably be next Sunday, but if something happens earlier, I'll be live with you guys. I'll see you next time. Take care.